Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Rutherford County School Board. Tonight's subject, among most other things, we've got a couple other things, but mainly budget items. First order of business tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Board Member Terry Hodge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I noticed that our first speaker tonight is Mr. John Marshall, and I see him, so introduce him.
We had a couple of things. We told you that the next budget meeting we had some additions that were new items this year. One of them was the youth science, and the other was starting our instructional technology. So asked both of those presentations tonight. Mr. John Marshall is here for a youth science presentation. I'll let you do the introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Odom. And on your tables, there is a handout, a note about youth science, and it's just a general reference for later. And to keep the presentation brief, knowing you have other items on the agenda tonight, I know one of the things is youth science is a very detailed and in-depth program. One report alone is over 30 pages, so we try to minimize that and not print those or go into details, but certainly if anyone would like access to the actual site, we'd be more than willing to do that. But for tonight's or for this afternoon's presentation, Mr. Jason Sloan is our instructional technology coach, does an amazing job for us and has been instrumental in helping us implement the program within the school. And I'd like to ask Jason to present the details for youth science.
Good evening, y'all. What I want to do first is show you a 2-minute video. It's an overview of the program to give you a good idea of exactly what the company entails.
At any point in life, there are many roads we can take. Some of our biggest decisions are made without any understanding of our natural abilities and interests. You know, our true genius. We stumble through life with the hope that we'll get lucky or get good advice to give us direction. Here's the thing. The cost of not knowing ourselves and making poor decisions is big, really big. College costs are skyrocketing. It's taking forever to graduate, and it's rough to find a good job even when you do graduate. Employers can be choosy, and it's nearly impossible to stand out from the pack. And the world has changed. We're all going to have many jobs in our lifetime, and 2/3 aren't thrilled about the ones they have. Think about it. After all that expense, time, and frustration to be stuck in a job that just doesn't fit? What if instead of stumbling around in the dark, you had an understanding of your real strengths and opportunities they create? You know, a future positioning system guiding you on where to go next and how to get there. In this economy, we could all use a little help. Okay, a lot of help. What you need is a game plan, and that's where youth science comes in. It helps you widen your lens through a series of scientifically based assessments, because we know that many of your innate talents are the key to unlocking your future. Through youth science, you'll take a series of short exercises that uncover information about the whole you. So what's the payoff? Powerful and actionable insight that can be applied to your academics, career, and personal life. You'll get detailed fit analysis for hundreds of careers and plenty of practical information, like what you'll get paid for your hard work, to help you make decisions that are right for you. We all need a little guidance along the path of life, and youth science is ready to help you every step of the way. Discover your genius, passion, and possibilities, and win at the game of life. So let's get started.
Okay, so start with a little bit of research for you, just to give you some ideas. So from a research perspective, aptitudes mature around 14 years of age, and then they don't change. So once those kids hit maturity, those things are going to stay the same. What does change, of course, is skills, which are going to improve over time, and then the interests, which will change with exposure to new things. So from that perspective, testing is best done at the end of 8th grade, beginning of that 9th grade year. And then an interest assessment being redone their junior year of high school to kind of refine that area once they've been exposed to a couple of years of high school. So that 8th grade year, they'll start off, we get all this information about them, we know what their aptitudes are, which aren't going to change, but by that junior year, they'll have gained some new skills, they'll have been exposed to some new things, so those interests may have changed slightly. Now, when we look at the aptitudes, just to give you a very simple basic breakdown of it, The core drivers, these are the natural gifts we feel driven to use. So those are those things that we are just, that innate ability that we have, such as inductive reasoning or spatial visualization. Then there's a personal approach, which is how we use our natural gifts. So the work approach, and then the interpersonal style. For example, are they an introvert or are they an extrovert? And then there's some amplifiers. This refers to the effectiveness and quickness with which we use those natural gifts. Something like hand-eye coordination or pattern memory. So Youth Science goes in and breaks this down for each individual student. The summary you have in front of you, what that does is it's a series of statements describing each student based on their aptitudes, their personal approach, on their amplifiers. You'll notice each one is a very positive statement into what these children can do, the different amplifiers, and all of this, the material. So it kind of walks them through the process of what they are and describes them. It also, in the very, very end, it'll show the top 3 areas of interest. So it breaks it down into here's the types of careers that they may be most successful. And it matches up their aptitudes with their interests to give them some areas to look at to say, hey, here's where you can be successful and content within a job. So, when we look at these, what types of careers? For example, mine, when I did it, actually showed instructional coordinator, which of course is what I do on a daily basis. So, from a whole school perspective at Oakland High School, we did our entire freshman class. I've just got 2 career choice lines on here for you to look at. You'll notice 40% of our kids showed an aptitude for computer and mathematics, 28% showed architectural and engineering aptitudes, and then you can see in the orange the interest levels. What our guidance counselors can do is take each individual student and they can actually see this information and they can help these kids and say, look, you had an aptitude and an interest for this type of career. Have you ever thought about this? Is this something you might be interested in? One of my guidance counselors called me and said, I had a kid come in and say, that's exactly what I wanted to be. So it was reaffirming their thought process as to what they wanted to do for a career. And then the last thing I'll look at is just a little bit of a deeper analysis for you. So matching the aptitudes and the interest allows students to discover what type of careers they could be successful in, but also what type of classes they may want to take. So it helps them along that lines. Here's some ideas of some things you may want to enroll in along those pathways, like with CTE pathways, of course. And then it generates a better understanding of how they process things. That's important for us because this can help us to develop more personalized learning for our students. When we start to look at how they learn, that gives us a better idea of what kind of things we can talk to them about. Okay, y'all have any questions?
Can you go back to the graph that showed the interest versus the other one? Need to go back.
Absolutely.
Really interesting here, when they took the assessment, 40% of the kids at Oakland freshmen had an aptitude to be able to do computer and mathematical aptitude, but only 22% either knew it or had thought about that. So one of the things that sometimes it opens up the kid that may come from a home or family that is not looking at other areas, it can be a kind of an aha moment. I didn't know I could really do something like that. Nobody in my family does that job or has done it. So that was one of the things that impresses me with it.
Yeah, and for me, one thing in particular was I took that and went a little deeper in terms of what about minorities and females, in particular with STEM, because those 2 groups there are being hired in huge numbers in the business world for these types of jobs. So when we get those students and say, look, you had an interest and an aptitude for this, I don't think you even realize how quickly you could get a career in this field if you followed that pathway. That was one of those things that I kind of was looking at.
Did it still do the military aptitude?
The ASVAB?
ASVAB.
Yeah, I think the junior year they do that.
How does that compare with this? Is there any similarities at all?
Not that I'm aware of. That would be something I'd have to go in and research and actually look at what the ASVAB actually breaks down into. I would assume they probably both all work off a similar basis because I know that from a career perspective, they pull their career stuff in from the government based on interest, but I also know that this is going to go into way more detail than what the ASVAB will ever show.
The nice thing about this, it catches them at the end of the year going into high school so that when they're selecting you have to have an elective focus, we know now, to graduate. So it helps the counselors and the parents and with the student to look at what's my real aptitudes, rather than at the junior year when it's usually end of the year before they're doing it anyway. I hate to say it's late, but it is a little late as far as high school is concerned.
Question. So are these two areas the only disciplines that are tested for on this?
No.
Okay, I didn't
What I
think
filtered
so,
it
but
down, I just filtered it down to these, but it essentially was 40 plus.
Okay.
Like, it's a very, very broad spectrum.
Both very technical
Yes.
type of discipline.
And I
For
chose
instance,
that
I
on,
wouldn't have scored at all on either of those when I was in high school.
yes, but I chose those on purpose just from a STEM perspective. But it's management, business, there was healthcare.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of different areas. If I open it all the way up, there's 40 or so.
Thank you.
Mr. Odom, am I remembering correctly, this has been somewhat piloted at Oakland, but this current budget that we're looking at is anticipating expanding it. How far?
It's for all of the 8th grade students from Rutherford County.
Okay.
And it's something the Chamber of Commerce was also interested in, doing this. And it's in other places in the country. Is the home base Georgia?
Well, the company's based out of Brentwood. Last year, they tested 10,000 sophomores in Georgia. And they actually brought a company in and did a full, complete study on the program to see the results. One of the main things, and I actually read the study last week, it said that from their analysis, that the students who went in and took it and actually read the results in the summary like you did, they actually had a better outlook on what their future performance could be from the results.
So how long has this company been in existence? In other words, how long have they been administering these tests for? I'm just curious how far out the statistics are showing in terms of, have kids already gone to college and started on their college path that can go back and be analyzed, or where are they at in that process as far as length of time?
To be 100% positive, I'm not sure. I know it's been around 5 years at least, though. So they would have started with a group that has gone into college by now.
And that's been the real key for us, because the ASVAB obviously is an aptitude-based assessment too, but the information and the feedback we get from this service is so much more in-depth, and how it ties also to careers, so that the students, they can go into their own accounts when they get those results, and they can go in and look at the different fields and then pursue what are those career, and they have hundreds, if not thousands, of career options that give them the different ranges of what additional post-secondary they need to pursue in order to reach that goal with them, and really the best tools for the counselors to engage, because we're really, the 22% kids, chances are they're interested in taking coursework already towards those things. It's about the other 18% in that aptitude range that have not thought about it maybe, or we're engaging them with that conversation. Have you thought about a STEM field? Have you thought about, because of your aptitude being so high in this area, engaging them with that dialogue and taking more rigorous coursework if needed, or also looking at pathways that we offer, because eventually it'll also tie in to our county-wide pathways and based on individual schools what we offer.
Actually, also, I think it also gives post-secondary institutions, colleges, universities that are known for teaching that particular area or something like that.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking about in terms of all the college kids that we all know about, some of us included, that went into college not only with an undeclared major, but truly without a clue what they wanted to do when they grew up, and how much these kind of things could help. Obviously, that's the
Yes,
goal,
it
right?
is.
So
It is unbelievably detailed. Like when I clicked on mine, it'll pull up an interest analysis for me, and it'll also show me how that matches up with people like that are in a similar field to see if I truly match up with that job. It's very interesting results.
Any other questions? Anybody?
do we know what the total price tag is going? Is it on
Yes,
here?
basically, it's in your budget under the
Okay, I
assessment
figured it probably
piece.
would be. I just hadn't gotten that far yet.
We actually had it last time for you.
Oh, that's
Youth
right.
science is about 42,000.
And that'll get all of our eighth graders in the
All of our
entire
eighth
county.
grade
yes.
should. You can go into that site. They have a website, Youth Science, and if you have any time, just kind of click on it. You can see more examples of what it does.
Thank you. Mr. Director?
The other thing that I mentioned, actually when I was talking about our scores this year, report card, that one of the areas that I felt we were behind in is again the one-to-one or placing a computer and that sort of thing with their students. We've had to devote so much of our monies to buildings and growth and that sort of thing. We're really not at the same place even some other districts are. I've asked our instructional technology departments, along with hardware technology over there. Mr. Solomon's there too. Ms. Benson is going to come this evening, kind of share some visions that we're starting with to see if it matches your vision.
Hello. There is a black folder on your table in front of you with the Dell device, and inside of that we have mapped out the digital conversion plan for the district for the next 2 years, along with some specs on the devices that we will provide for students and teachers. The device you have in front of you is the Dell device that we have chosen for students to use. As we talk about our digital conversion, we started in the 2016 school year with the blended learning pilots, where we train teachers first. Always in this district, instruction comes first, so we wanted our teachers to be trained on how to effectively use these tools in the classroom to benefit learning. Some of our goals that we have set with the digital conversion has been to ensure that we have the proper infrastructure in place. Mr. Solomon and his department have worked hard to make sure we have the Wi-Fi access points that we need, the broadband that we need, and working on making sure we have a technology replacement plan. So without that in place first, none of this would work well for us. So he has really worked to map that out, and over this summer, the Wi-Fi access points in our middle schools will be upgraded. The following summer, that will go into our high schools, and then the following summer the access points will be improved in our elementary schools. We also wanted to have a sustainable device. This price point that Dell has worked with for us is at $190. Our district can sustain this throughout the schools. They've also made benefits to our parents. There's a small card that's included in your packet that's about Dell membership. Our parents will be provided a 30% discount if they would like to purchase any of these type of devices for their use at home. So we are encouraging parents, if that is the direction they would like to go, to use this benefit at home. We also have a similar benefit for parents with Microsoft, where they are allowed to use 365 on 5 of their devices in their home because of what we purchase here within the district. Again, sustainability and equity of access. We wanted to make sure that all of the students, as we do the digital conversion, have the same amount of access. If you hear of some districts that go one-to-one and they phase it in, and that means that some students don't have that access while others do. It was a vision of this district that we do this conversion in a staggered way, where we make sure all of our students have the same amount of access as we convert more and more digitally over the next several years, with the ultimate goal of someday going to one-to-one. On the back of the center form, if you look, there's a timeline. It maps out what we have done this school year with our middle school principals and training them and making them more aware of how to use digital devices in their classrooms to benefit students in learning. We've taken them to other districts where this has already been in place, let them see what was happening there. One of the biggest takeaways that I saw from those principals was the fact that they saw that students weren't constantly in front of a computer. It's traditional instruction combined with digital instruction. So in blended learning, you get both of those factors. Again, that is proven to be one of the best and most efficient ways to use these devices as stewards of the money. If we're going to spend for this, we don't want it to be an over-glorified pencil and piece of paper. So that way, teachers are still using their best practice traditionally, and they're using best practice with digital instruction. Also on the back, it maps out the professional development plan. Before any teacher is given a device, we have trained them. They go through an academy with us, or a training at the building level, and then we have supplied them with the devices. Our model school will be Rockville Middle. They are about to go through a digital conversion because it's time for their refreshing of their computers in their building, and that will take place before the end of this school year and give us the opportunity to test out a lot of the things that we've put on this paper to make sure we are ready for next school year when we begin.
One of the reasons we chose Rockville was, just like I said, we were refreshing the computers in the classroom, and the current student computers are costing about $750 a piece. At this price point of $190 a piece, we could put 15 to 17 of these in each classroom instead of that one, and that way you put more devices in students' hands and you can change the instruction in that classroom much more readily. We're also replacing some of the labs, so what we're doing is We have 7 labs at Rockville Middle. We're doing away with those labs as a labs because we now have basically a lab setting in every classroom come July. That frees up 7 additional classrooms for classroom use instead of lab use. So now I've added 7 classrooms for a teacher or a growth positions to be used there, and that reduces the number of possible portables we would need for that building. They already have portables there. So we're increasing the utilization of the space at all those middle schools and elementary and high schools as well.
Tell me why you chose this device. I think I know, but would y'all talk about that a minute?
One, it's a great partnership with Dell. They want us to be successful. They are invested in this community. In fact, the rep has children in this community, so very much invested, but the cost of it, cost effectiveness, the device is one that is sturdy, it's durable, it was made for use in schools. It's lightweight. We even considered the fact that it's a lighter weight one compared to some of the others if you're going to have students have these where they're moving around in the classroom. And it also is compatible with Windows 10, and that is our Microsoft programs that we use here and all our teachers are trained on.
It's lightweight also. It's that smaller form factor. As adults, sometimes we think it's a little small, but it's actually the size that a student would prefer over something much larger than that. And we're really wanting to go toward and work toward that 1-to-1. So if we're looking at that $190 price point for this device, we can put more of those in the classroom and actually get one in every student's hand in the near future.
And that's also a price point. As a principal, just being out of a building, I could have helped my school to grow that. I could afford that at Christiana Elementary. That's something principals can afford at all of our schools to sustain, to help with this effort.
We have a couple of our Title I schools that have bought into that already, and they're at 1-to-1 at their schools now because they've used Title I funding to purchase the remaining devices.
So you're talking about they're using this exact device?
Yes, ma'am.
Which schools are those, Mr. Zago?
Smyrna Middle.
Smyrna Middle. Our middle, we're working toward that as well.
And David Urey is not to 1-to-1, but they're an elementary school that is about to have a refresh of devices because of their construction monies, and so they too are going to have this device.
You know, another reason you have other options, and people listening to us Google some other options, but our agreement with Microsoft, it gives us Microsoft Office that can be downloaded and used. And as we looked at it, most likely people going into the business world, when we kind of get into high school and we look at that, people graduating, they're more likely going to be going to an environment that's using a Microsoft Office type product, you know? So it just kind of makes some sense. You have some memory here, some hard drive memory, which another thing we're looking at is textbooks, because we already know that we're fast approaching a time when we're going to have the downloadable textbook. So this, again, gives us the opportunity to take a look at downloading the textbooks. Kids could have it and go to this platform. You just can't go to the online textbooks unless you have a platform for your students. We have to furnish. So the price point here is finally gotten it to a point that is very competitive. I'm very proud of our people. If you'll look at their objective and how they've thought it out in a timeline, our staff has done a really good job of kind of putting this together. I think I mentioned this to you in January or something like that. They'd been looking at it already, but kind of putting in an organized function for you.
This device has enough memory that we can hold that, where some of our other options that are out there that are not necessarily utilized after high school or after university, they don't have the hard drive to put some of that on. You have to have cloud space for that.
That's the question I was going to ask. How many textbooks with this hard drive?
We could put all we want on that, and if we have to, we could use, each student has enough cloud space too. It's got a large enough hard drive to use that. Am I correct, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, it's more about having access in the device to be able to get to the cloud.
I was talking about the future.
Yeah,
Right.
we would have
When they
that.
start taking this home.
We would have that space.
No, that was where I was heading as well. Is this a take-home device or is this a classroom device?
Not
We're
now.
working toward that.
Okay.
At the moment, we're putting 15 in each one of our middle school classrooms. So each pair of classrooms basically becomes a lab. So now we've done away with all the need of replacing for like testing computers. We're getting away from technology being thought of as a testing device to becoming an instructional device to enhance instruction. Not just change the mode of instruction, but to enhance student learning and student engagement.
I notice in the brochure here that there's a tablet option, and we have chosen just the folio option, and I'm talking about, you know, the actual device. Are there other things that we have taken a look at and said, we looked at that, but we decided to do this or that, or?
As we worked with blended learning and the teachers that we trained, we really used different types of scenarios and devices to see what was best for our teachers instructionally, and then followed some research with other districts and their success with different devices. And this is the one that we decided would work best for our students and teachers.
We've piloted multiple devices in classrooms before we settled on this. And not just the price point is the reason, but just the durability and the look. We've gotten a lot of reports from Dale talking to us about how long. This actual device is durable enough that it lasts so long that the different software providers stop providing the support, and that's the reason this goes away.
Okay. The faculty device that is complementary to this, is it more robust? Is it a little different?
Yes.
It is. And we're actually replacing multiple devices with that. We're replacing the all-in-one in the classroom, plus their tablet. It's a foldable yoga tablet, but it's also touchscreen, and it has the pen access so that teachers could use it instead of like an iPad. After we replace all the devices that would be in the classroom and utilize that, it's only about $100 more than what we're putting in a teacher's classroom, but we've cut all the service and the maintenance of 3 or 4 devices down to 1 device.
Okay. If we leave all of them off the charger one night, what are we going to do the next morning? Do we have enough outlets to be able to plug everything in?
The great thing we've been doing is working with Mr. Clardy in engineering. We're putting USB outlets in all the new buildings where the plug-ins are in the back, and doing away with that and saving some cost in there as well. But we're also retrofitting some of the places that we're going back and doing and putting USB and 110 outlets in the same place.
Great question.
Kind of a nice looking little computer, isn't it?
And we've talked about this for years, and it looks like
Price
it's
point's
finally...
getting there now.
Yeah.
We talked about if that was going to get any cheaper, and now we're saying that we've got it down to the point that it's going to be right about that cost.
$190 is the systems price.
Yeah, and I think it's about $250 to $260 online for a parent to buy, but then they get the 30% discount on that same device.
So that's the price before their discount.
If you go online, and I went online and looked this model up, and you can from these other sheets, you can go online and look at them.
We have a few other devices that we'll use because, for example, a STEM class would need more horsepower and a little bit more memory to run some of the projects that they do. We're looking at about 4 or 5 different devices for specialty classes, but that's very small numbers. The majority of the devices are going to be exactly what you see in front of you.
And this doesn't change or impact in any way what Mr. Edelman referenced before, the whole licensing agreement we've got with Microsoft Office, because that really has been a really, really nice plus that I think a lot of people out there in the community are not aware of that we have, that basically each student has 3?
They have five additional they can use at home. They can't use those at school, but they can use them at home.
At home. As you,
Good
if
for a
you
family now.
Yeah, it's huge.
get rid of an old device, you pull that off of there, you maintain that, so you'll always have 5 licenses available to everyone.
If a child's visiting grandma for summer, you can do it on a device there, then you can get off of that and take it away and have it again, 5 again when you get back home. So
You don't lose it once you necessarily.
once you load it onto one, right, you can.
You have 5 simultaneous licenses.
Take away the pack mule mentality with all these books that they have to take home. It would be kind of cool for them.
Chiropractors may not like it.
Well, yeah.
I hear you.
But this is exciting stuff here.
It definitely is.
I'm kind of glad we waited. I think we waited for a better product and certainly functionality with where we're going. You know, it's exciting to me, and I think it will make a difference. I think what'll happen is, when you start 2 to 1, as I said before, I think you're gonna, as Christmas presents and birthday presents, and the prices are not so bad, I think you're gonna find families also saying, hey, if I can get this much discount, you know, to buy this machine, I just want one for me. And They'll happen a little bit.
On any model, it's not just that model.
Oh, so even if the parent wants to purchase something bigger
You
on
want
a desktop, they
more
still are going to.
horsepower, more memory at home.
Right.
Get the same amount.
That membership number is distinctive to this district, and if they use that, it's on anything they purchase through Dell. They get a discount.
Member ID, it's on this little card you have.
Oh, okay.
We've got working on agreement.
Pluses.
We've got agreement with Microsoft, now we've got kind of agreement with Dell. We got some pretty good negotiators for us.
Sounds like
Very
it.
good.
Dell actually builds the computers in Wilson County, don't they? Or
They do have a plant there, yes, sir.
They said if we thought we would have large numbers of these ordered at some point, for us to let them know, and they keep them in stock so that they can be delivered as well. So they'll work with it.
Any further questions, board? Thank you both. Mr. Odom?
We're ready to look at the budget then, aren't we? Some things, kind of looking at the spreadsheet, and we'll cover this. Mr. Sandvig may have for you tomorrow night or Wednesday night the line item breakdown, so that you can kind of go over before our next meeting. Still working especially on the insurance piece. It's still, we do not have at this point very much of the revenue stream yet. Again, we're looking at our want list, but not a lot of the revenue stream. Legislature's still in session, so the State Department of Education has not provided us with anticipated amounts. We received some early amounts, maybe from federal government. That can change, but it's still in the process of being adopted. So this is pretty much the same format you saw last time. Let me kind of go over once again. If you'll grab your sheets, we have this in 8 sheets, but fixed cost, mandated changes. Interrupt me anytime you would like. Remember, we agreed to do on line 3, opening of Rockville High was $5 million over 2 years. We committed last year $2,500,000. We'll try to set aside an ending fund this year, $2,500,000 again. So that would not be a new budget item for next year. If we can do from the ending fund this year, we'd have our $5 million. Am I right, Mr. Sandvig, on that? So that kind of puts us ahead on that. The big change last time, we're still seeing from the state that, and this is the thing that's really, really tough for us, the district retirement contribution, and this is for our staff, you know, both certified and classified in this. Mr. Sandvig, it affects both.
This is just certified, our classified rate held.
Okay. So our contribution is about an additional $2 million than what it's been in the past. The state's going from 9.08 to 10.46. I don't know whether you've been following the news or not, what's going on in Kentucky, yes. But they have their retirement system in a mess, way underfunded in issues. So our legislature, you know, a couple of years ago now, that teachers, new teachers have to take the hybrid plan, was a combination of 401k plus Tennessee's retirement. But as part of their things to keep it legitimate and to keep it fully funded is that they'll increase our contribution. So starting next year, about an additional $2 million. That and that alone is between 3 and 4 cents on the tax rate just to do the contribution.
In our BEP allocation from the state, they will start using this higher retirement percentage. So they'll cover about half of.
That'll help.
Yeah.
The next one is, remember, district health insurance contribution. And Mr. Sandvig, they're working on this. They did vote. We think it's going to be at the 8%. The commission still has to vote on April the 12th if they accept that from the insurance recommendation. But the change in our contribution for insurance from our share for our employees next year is an additional $3,750,000. You know, and that's almost $6 million of our increase. You're looking at, that's a huge amount for us to take that really doesn't change anything, but it's more money. It's that's coming out of what we're already doing is what that amounts to. So any other comments or statement about that? Fixed cost. There's actually another fixed cost that's kind of at the end, but we'll talk about that a little later. It's tied to that. But Then let's take a look at our assessments piece. And again, if you remember, I told you last time that we were showing you all of kind of our assessments so that you as a board could get a picture of what we're doing in assessments, what's changed, what's not. The real change, the first one in line 9, the ACT Inspire, SMOOP was not being used as much, and actually the ACT Inspire is a better product. So we're kind of swapping out $110,000. We were dropping SMOOP at about $115,000, so that one's a good change for us. The ACT high school curriculum support at $85,000 would be a new item for 18-19, requested by our high school principals. And I think Mr. Sandvik did send you what principals are requesting, that sort of thing. It's so many pages. He did send it as a link. Some of the high school principals are requesting this, we're interested in that. ACT Mastery Prep, that's an additional $9,000 for middle school, so part of that increase would be middle school. The Edgenuity, that's not new. Line 13 is not new. We have to screen all for RTI, has to be done by state requirement. Phelps kindergarten screening was required to do kindergarten screening, line 14 and 15. SAT entrance screener. Central Magnet and Thurman Francis, they need 2 years of data to help our students that are coming in. And so they're using this. After this next year, we should have enough TN Ready in place that we may not have to do this. To do that, to give 2 good years of a student's performance. Youth Science you saw tonight for 4,200 students at about $10 per student is $42,000. So that's what we were talking about in the presentation.
This says high school aptitude assessment, and yet we are still talking about an 8th grade implementation?
For the high school guidance counselors to use coming in. It'll be taken, I think we're targeting somewhere in the 2nd semester, I think, of 8th grade, right, Mr. Marshall? And that's what we did. 2nd semester. So then when they sit down and are beginning to plan their coursework for high school, then you've got this data, that parents have this data, student has this data, but as importantly, high school counselor is working with that student, has that aptitude also.
So this is an assessment tool. I'm making a point here. This is an assessment tool that we're going to administer in the 2nd semester and get back in a matter of a week or 2 and then be able to use the data that we get from the assessment.
I'm not sure how quickly it comes back. Can you tell me right off? We do get it back, but I'm not sure a week or 2 will do it. It might. It's online and it's calculated online. So.
Better than the 6 months that it takes for state testing.
Oh, yes.
That's the point that I'm making.
Sir. Point well made.
A Brentwood company is able to accomplish that task.
Oh, me. Then what we're already spending at 355, 546 subtracted from it. So you got 0.6% increase by adding these other assessments in, so 146,000 there. So any questions on the assessment piece? Any further that you'd like to talk about on that? The next section is our certified personnel. It's new, and I'll try to outline some of the changes. On page 2 is kind of where we did that. Did reduce our growth from the 1,400, still using the same ratio, 1 to 22. Why do we use 1 to 22? Really, your K through 3 is 1 to 22. We've also found, of course, CTE is 1 to 20, is what you have to maintain that size there for, although we got CTE separated out. And, you know, it's not when 30 more students get there. It's when that school in their K3 or their 4-5 exceeds that ratio of either 1 to 20 or 1 to 25. If it took 12 students to happen, then you're going to have another teacher. So it may or may not be when you get 30. It's just when that ratio, and we run so high on the ratio that we don't have a lot of reserve capacity as students move in with us. So that's what happens. So that would be 11 less than you saw in the first version that we gave you a few weeks ago. Still 55 additional at our estimated, and 62.5 is salary plus the fringe benefits. Fringe benefits is a huge factor now. So that would be about 55 additional teachers. ESL did add one more ESL teacher, taught with Ms. Hall again. So it kind of runs 1 year behind, but we are required to do, for those that are being served in ESL, are identified and served in ESL. We have to maintain a 1:35 ratio. So we were at least one short. We're very rich in growth in the ESL population for this. So just to meet that ratio is 13. So that's that position. SPED teachers, about 11% of our students are special ed. So if you kind of use that ratio, that's the 0.11. If we go from 1,400 down to 1,200 and take about 11%, then we reduce that requirement, takes about another teacher off. But right now, that's designed to be 7 classroom teachers and 2 comprehensive development teachers. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Odom, on that percentage, and I know it's been growing, but statistically, what have we been looking at as far as the
we're less than
students
most
over the years?
You know, we used to run 13, 14%, and if you look at the state report card now, you'll find that a lot of them anywhere from 13% to 17%. Most of our city runs over 15%, I think, last time I looked.
The state running about 16%, we're running about 2.25.
Okay, so we're rounding to 11, just to be on the kind of on the safe side, sort of. Sure.
It's our RTI program. I mean, we're picking up students earlier than having to get in and intervening quicker. Especially happens where most of your students are identified. You identify very few students in high school for special education because they've been in school a number of years. But by RTI, that program in place, if you're able to pick them up and do interventions to help them catch up, you're not having to do that labeling later on that they need that level of special education services. So I think we're ahead of the curve on this. I'm very much pleased with how RTI, but we put a lot of local monies into that, and I've told the state that, you know, because we furnish the interventionists and the coaches in the schools before the state's funding any of it. They just starting this year to offer some funding, you know, 1 to every 2,750 students. That's in the governor's budget. So interventions for Title I schools, and this is because because we furnished it in the other schools, what was paid for with Title I funds, you cannot do what's called supplanting. Title I school has to receive what everyone else gets, plus they can hire additional ones with Title I funding that's available. So we had 8 teachers basically. When we get through all the high schools and everything that's done, we have got to pick up 8 teachers out of the GPS budget in order to meet that supplanting mandate. Do you understand what I'm talking about here? I think you may have dealt with it enough that you know now. So that's a requirement from the federal government for that funding.
Mr. Odom,
Yes, sir.
if you could clarify a bit on that. There was an interpretation before ESSA passed that we were all right doing this. ESSA ended that.
There were like 3 possibilities of doing some things with some high-risk student number schools that were there under No Child Left Behind. But when ESSA there, it no longer left that available for us to do. So then we had 16 positions at that time, if I remember correctly, Jeff, that we were utilizing the old No Child Left Behind ruling that was no longer available under ESSA, that we had to fix. So we fixed those 8, we picked up 8 positions last year in the GP, and we have to finish picking that up this year because ESSA come to the full way.
We were not, well, under the old rules, we were not.
Under the new rules, we are.
Mr. Duke is here, as Title I Director. Are they saying it correctly for you,
Yes.
Mr. Okay.
Well, it begs the question, though, that last year and then with this budget, we're freeing up $677,000 in Title I funds that we used to use to pay these. Is there any reason to talk about what we're using that money for now? Because we're not using it to pay for these positions?
Federal regulations that require us to use that in specific ways, and like Mr. Odom said, it has to be in addition to what we're doing.
Mr. Duke is here, and some of you have been attending the meetings at the schools. They have an allocation. Do you want him to take time to explain how Title I allocation goes, or, I mean, that's up to you.
Oh, only if it, I mean, I understand the typical allocation of additional funds, but, this is,
Why don't you step up, Mr. Duke, quickly and tell you we cannot decide up here always what a Title I school.
Yeah, so to answer your specific question, I'll be honest, most of that money that is being freed up is being reallocated to additional staff. So again, federal funds are always have to be in addition to what is provided at the local and state level to enhance the academic program. So it all has to be instructional, and it all has to be in addition to what is funded at the local level. So in this situation, because these are high-need schools, whereas in most of our Title I in all of our schools, the county will, after this budget, be providing 2 interventionists, one typically for reading and one typical for math. Because we have such high needs at our Title I schools, we're adding additional interventionists almost always in those positions. So instead of having 2 interventionists, they would have possibly 4 interventionists, with those extra funds being reallocated to purchase those. Also in that, a lot of times we're adding additional instructional coaches. Title I is great because it's a blessing of a lot of money for our most at-risk schools. There are enormous amounts of federal requirements that they have to track at the school level. So these coaches not only work with our teachers, not only work with our new teachers and following the RTI frameworks that they do in all the schools, they also help follow the requirements of the federal mandates, so that isn't having to be done by principals and assistant principals as well. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Line 24 is career and technical education teachers. Ms. Pilgrim is here. She meets with every principal, and they look at their programs next year. They anticipate their enrollments, and she's telling us right now that it's going to take 6 additional CTE teachers for next year. That's our best guesstimate at this particular point, after meeting with all the principals of our high schools. Assistant principals, basically what we're looking at, Rocky Fork Middle started with 1, and we did the grandfathering, so their numbers are about to pop. It'll be well over the 1,000 mark also, so we need to add the second one there. I just kind of made you a note there. Blackman Middle has 3 APs. We need to add another one to Rocky Fork Middle so they'll have 1 more. At least go to 2 at this particular point. Oakland Middle School, basically looking at that one because of the annex building there, which would give them another one, which is staffed. That's the same way they do it at Blackman Middle School. Siegel Middle is going to be, it looks like, over 1,200 next year. That's going to be an issue for us. So, my recommendation is that we provide them another AP there with that number of teenage students. So then high school RTI coaches, we did some piloting, some Riverdale, some Laverne, and Oakland. Coaches have already been piloting that. We now need to carry that coach to the other remaining high schools and do that. So that would be 5 RTI coaches so that we have the same thing at each school. So that would be 5 positions, which basically a lot of it will be our funding, except for whatever we get from RTI from the state with these, again, 1 position for the 2,750 students. The regular ed and SPED behavior specialists, we talked about that last time some. The need to do behavioral interventions is growing in our schools along with our numbers. And we need to also, not just as a SPED, but to begin to blend some of those and look at the people we hire that will work both in our schools that are special ed and with our students who are special ed, but also with our students who are not special ed. So that would be 2 positions there. Haven't added a school psychologist in a long time. This was on your last version. That's the same. The ESL specialist, start this one off. I did reduce that one some from the full year back to 220 days. back in, which is basically the 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after school, to help Ms. Hall. She's actually evaluating 104 ESL teachers herself too now, but she needs some help doing that, and we need people coming out of this office to help her do that. She has a hard time getting that done. Again, we have so many ESL students now, we really need to support that. Line 31 is fine arts specialist to full-time. And what a lot of this is, really is a high there. This would be Ms. Halford, to increase that to a full-time position based upon the total number. Our fine arts programs are very large. She's actually handling elementary through high school. You required art and music in elementary schools, middle schools, certainly offered in high school. So the number she is, my recommendation would be to fund that to full position. School technology positions is again growth, adding schools 2 positions there. We call them the STSs. Again, they work under Miss Benford. You know, we talked about Miss Benson, excuse me, work under her for that, which this has been in place for a number of years. Music and art positions. This would be new recommendations for new, if we can hold it. It's mainly for growth. We're getting so many middle school students entering band now that, and the real difference in middle school versus high school, you spend time teaching them to play the instrument and then to play it in a band. So they starting with a lot of the 6th grade, and they get private lessons and all too, but trying to work with these kids to be band ready. And then we have the bands in 7th and 8th grade, and they did an excellent presentation at World Outreach, you know, a month or so ago now, and we had 7th and 8th grade, 9, 10, 11, 12, 3 different groups that Ms. Halford had organized for that. But we took this in a budget crisis a few years ago, we actually took away those other halves from the middle school. But our enrollment in our middle schools then were 800, 900. Now they're 1,000, 1,100, 1,400, Blackman Middle and places like that. And we need an additional, the request with about 2,300 students at Blackman High School for art programs, it's going to take another art teacher and all to just fill student request. You know, just like you'd add for CTE or math or whatever it is, that's because of their numbers. So that's kind of the 6 positions there. School counselors, I did reduce that. I took the one away from Oakland High to try it again. I used some reduction in this one. The extra counselor at Oakland High, and then Laverne High, we didn't get that grant that was in there to have to add that position. We had to pick up because of that grant, and they did not receive that grant. So that's what that position was in that particular case. So you have listed there, what we're basically doing is taking where they have a half, or they may have 1.5, trying to make it a full 2. You get to Rockville Elementary, for example, it's approaching 1,000 students. You got 1.5 counselors. You're moving them. You add a half, they can have 2 that's there. They have a curriculum now. The state has created a curriculum for guidance counselors they have to cover. And so that's what that's for. ROTC, Cadet Command, we share the cost in this. There's a little bit less than the cost. Remember, they work summers too. So ROTC does reimburse some because a lot of their competitions and camps and other activities are summertime. So ROTC, but the federal government does share with us. And so Colonel Houchins has kind of got that in place to add it. That's Blackman High for that growth. And some of that will probably change when Rockville opens. These positions we're answering, and we do reallocation, you know, and we change our overall numbers at schools. These people will be adjusted. We don't hire all new every time we open a school. Of course, we readjust. Then on page 3 of 8, line 36 is the Rockville High startup staff. Again, about 5 positions. They'll work 126 days, the principal, 106 days for the others. We need to do a little over a half a year to get the person in place. Typically, we place them up here. We have space to do it. Lots of decisions have to be made, from some of the colors and the curtains and all the things. And also the principal there has to start selecting who's going to be my coaches for all of these subjects, who's going to be my custodian and does the interviews, all of the other staff. And so we start that in place. So very often, my experience has been the first thing the principal hires is themselves, usually a secretary or something like that, to handle the traffic. People want to know, am I going to be in your zone? They get constant calls and all the time. So that's again in preparation, which we'd have, even though it doesn't open until 19, to let them start earlier, we're going to spend $385,000 to put those positions in out of the 18-19 budget. Rocky Fork Elementary startup staff, not as many days for the principal. That's the principal in that one. Coaching and athletic director supplements, and that was the athletic committee that y'all had that came out of that one. That's a recommended change to supplements, and then one safety supplement in that, $172,000. The archery coaching supplements, Ms. Moore asked us to take a look at some of that. 2% elementary, 4% 6 through 8 middle grades, and 6% high for archery. Cost of that's $82,550.
Yeah, if I may.
Sure.
To that, Mr. Hammond, thank you.
Interrupt me anytime, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and this is just, and Mr. Sandvig, thank you for, there you are, for helping me to put this together. I think, at least I believe that we all saw with the presentation that was done for us at our last board meeting by the archery coaches and the kids and the parents, that the sport is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's bringing a lot of recognition, a lot of good notoriety to Rutherford County. As a matter of fact, real quickly, I'll just mention, I'm not going to take up too much time, but Mr. Bonanno and his coach, Coach Essinger, thank you, from Stewart's Creek, right, are here this evening, and they just shared with me, I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this or not, but the state archery tournaments, championships, were held here in Rutherford County this past weekend. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend any of them because I was attending a certain high school's baseball tournament down in Chattanooga. But once again, they did extremely well, and I just want to share a couple of the outcomes with you, and hopefully we'll hear more about it later as we go down the road. But out of the state tournament, at the state tournament this past weekend, I'm going to try not to mess this up, Mr. Bonanno, we had, out of the elementary school teams, 5 of our elementary schools placed in the top 10 in the state. We had Christiana Elementary, 2nd place, Buchanan, 4th place, Wilson, 7th place, Browns Chapel, 9th, and Stewart's Creek 10th. Our middle school teams, there were 7 of our Rutherford County teams that placed in the top 10, with Stewart's Creek Middle being the state champions in 1st place. So we had Central in 2nd, Whitworth in 3rd, Christiana in 4th, so we pretty much dominated the whole middle school arena, if you will, in that tournament. And high school, Riverdale, we had 5 in the top 10. Riverdale 2nd place, Central 3rd, 4th, Oakland 4th, and Stewart's Creek 6th. So once again, some pretty amazing success that I think is testimony even more so to the necessity and the importance of this archery program. So what I tried to do, and each of you has a separate sheet that Ms. Joyce was kind enough to make copies of, that gives the breakdown where Mr. Sandvig went in and actually calculated for us what realistically I think he believes, based on average salaries and the different things that go into that calculation, what this percentage supplement is going to be equivalent to this coming year. That would be really for any sport, Mr. Sandvig, right? Which, with all of the benefits and everything added to, you're looking at roughly about $522.47, the equivalent of 1%. And although I know our archery coaches would have liked to have seen more, I did feel like we needed to try to find a spirit of compromise here to start off, because I realized that this is the first year that we're formally requesting this be put in as a firm supplement, not just a discretionary area. So yes, what I had requested, Mr. Sandvig, work up for me, you'll see is looking at 6% for the high school coaches, 4% for middle school, and 2% for elementary. So at this juncture, I'm not going to make a motion this evening necessarily for this. I'd like to afford everybody time to kind of look at it and obviously ask questions if any other board members have input that they'd like to share, I certainly would welcome that, and will answer questions as I'm able.
We have questions from Ms. Moore on the, and let's keep it for right now, at least to the archery. If you have questions, this would be a good time to ask them. I know her, she's going to have a motion the next time.
Right now, there's another page we've been provided that indicates that the discretionary supplement, specifically at Smyrna and Christiana, is at 6%. Would we allow discretionary to go in addition to if we fix this at 2, 4, and 6? Or would we be, in effect, saying to Christiana and Smyrna that they're going from currently 6 in a discretionary circumstance to a 4% in a fixed?
You know, I think that's some decisions we've got to make dealing with the discretionary part. That, as this is new to us, is that some of this may not be all new money if you blend it into the discretionary. I mean, you've even talked about discretionary even at the high school and some other areas too. So again, that's something that we'll need to decide and give Mr. Sandvik direction in as to how we do that. So I don't know, again, whether elementary would have to be new because they don't have any discretionary or anything.
True.
You do have that discretionary. Is it 10% total in the middle and high? What is your discretionary?
I believe 10%.
Yes.
10?
10.
No,
Right.
Right. We talked about adding it, but we haven't.
Mr. Holiday, to answer your question, we'd have to wait and see what Ms. Moore's motion was.
Sure.
But it was when we discussed this, and we got the excellent presentation the last time and so forth, and I don't know exactly where I'm going to come down on all of this, but Mr. Bonnaroo's one thing the point that he made, and he's sitting right back there, so we can ask him to make it again, but that this supplement was not consistent, and it wasn't. Well, it could change every year. I guess that's what inconsistent means. And if the principal wanted to change it, he could change it, because the discretionary fund is just exactly that. It's at the discretion of the principal. So if he didn't want to have archery or anything else on here for that matter, or he wanted to add something to whatever, he could do that, or she could do that. I can answer part of Mr. Holliday's question. My intent on this, my hope was that we not tamper with discretionary funds at either level, and which would allow the principals considerable leeway at some place in their building that they felt like they needed to put some additional funds. Also, and just reminding the board at the point of being very redundant, is that this has not been looked at in 10 or 12 years. And I can almost promise that it's probably not going to be looked at again for quite some time. I don't know that, but I'm just saying. So that would allow the principal and us as a board a little leeway. Now, Ms. Moore, I've overstepped my bounds here. What is your feeling on the discretionary funds? I mean,
well, and as we talked about before, and I believe the archery coaches were really excited when those discretionary funds got put in there. But as we've seen, again, like you said, it is discretionary, so it's up to those principals. So if they wanted to take those discretionary funds and pay the archery coaches, then in some cases that's happening. But they also have the discretion to use them elsewhere. So, my whole intent and purpose with this was to make sure simply that the archery coaches, that the archery sport is recognized to the point where we have an established supplement for those coaches. As to whether or not we take away or leave the discretionary fund alone, I think is really, again, it's a decision for all of us to make, but I would like to see that not happen, obviously, and those principals still have those funds to spend, and if it's not on archery, since they're now getting, if we do vote it in firm supplements, that they have the ability to use it elsewhere, but obviously that's a decision.
You also have SROs doing it in some places.
Right.
Some other complications mixed in with that.
We did encourage the principals, but I admit, just verbally, We just kind of told them that we thought that if archery was important to them and in their school, that they put some of the discretionary fund money into archery. Now, I think that's kind of an important statement to make because we didn't tell them to put it anywhere else. That was their choice. We just encouraged them to do that. And you can see by the sheet here that they, in fact, did that for middle schools. But a fixed rate, a fixed supplement, would of course be consistent system-wide, school-wide, each school. Mr. Hodge.
I just want to make sure I understand it right. We're going to have a 6% max, correct? Is that what you're proposing? I guess what I'm saying, going with 6%, you're not going to be able to use any discretionary funds towards this. We're talking about additional money, right?
Well, it depends on our motion, but yes.
Whatever your motion is based on.
Yes.
If I'm reading this thing right, it's probably what you're going to. And don't let me put words in your mouth.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, obviously this was my intent that this would be fixed supplements, but the 6% would be high school. And again, you at 4% for the middle school and then 2% for the
whatever it is. But I guess what I'm saying is this going to be new money or are we talking about using discretionary money? That's what you see what I'm talking about?
Doing away with discretionary.
Right. No, the intent was that this would be new money. But again, obviously open to discussion if the board determines that because of this new money, if we do need to look at adjusting the discretionary fund. And certainly I knew that was something that we would want to address.
You just want to have a maximum amount that we go with.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, sir.
That's the only thing I was trying to get at.
Okay.
Mr. Sandy.
Just my understanding is that the discretionary supplement, none of that can go to a head coach.
That's correct.
So this would be money for a head coach, but if no other action is taken by the board, then I would say my interpretation would be the discretionary monies would be available for assistant coaches still.
Well, now wait a minute.
Or is that not?
Present coaches that are presently coaching, in other words, they cannot take this discretionary fund and give it to the head baseball coach. But they, obviously if they're going to have if they're going to have, they can't do it soccer either, but if they're going to have an archery coach, somebody's got to be head coach. That's not what you're asking, is it?
Well, I was interpreting this that or at middle school and high school, the 4% would go to the head coach, then the discretionary would be available, that some could be, at the principal's discretion, go to assistant archery coaches.
That was always my intent.
Well, I think the key question is then, kind of going back to that, Mr. Hodges' question is these numbers that we've got for the coaches, and I'm sure Mr. Bonanno Coach Bonanno can answer this for us. The 24 at elementary, the 11 at middle, and the 9 at high school, those are all considered head coaches? Okay, so that didn't include any of the current assistants or anything. So I don't know if that helps or not.
They're already included in discretionary well, actually both groups are already included in the discretionary if the discretionary funds were used that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
So at Eagleville, we have an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. If there's one coach for all three programs, are we talking 6% still? I mean, we're not going to, are we doing 6, 4, and 2 for that one individual to coach all three programs, if that happens?
That's an excellent question. I really hadn't thought about that. We do have 3 levels of archery,
right?
And at that school,
and we have two levels at Central, and we have 2 levels at Thurman Francis.
Okay.
But we have 3 levels at Eagleville. So.
Okay, I see your point, and you want to know we're going to pay that person 12% at Eagleville if it's just one person coaching.
In other words, if you've got a coach that's coaching high school, middle, and elementary?
Yes.
Do we have that?
Yeah, he can. I don't want to give it to him, but yeah, he can get it. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I'm fixing to ask.
You what now?
Kind of,
Why did you bring this up? Go ahead.
I was just,
It's a good question.
I
It is.
apologize
No,
for
no, you're
thinking.
right. But, that's got to be settled at some point.
yeah, I mean, we've got to make a rule.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have, I guess, you know, to me, just kind of looking at it simplistically, that you're going to have a coach to coach that team. If they've got a team that's competing at these kind of levels, I mean, you're going to have a coach, whether it's one or whether it's two or three, if we've got all three levels of schools being coached by the same coach, which I would think is going to become increasingly difficult. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but am I making sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. Estes, a comment. Bail us out.
I'm gonna get you deeper.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe that this 10% we put in to make sure that we had money to cover things like archery or any sport that didn't have a supplement, right?
Right.
Well, in this middle school one here, we've got one that's on football, some on track. Those, I might be willing to go along with this if we state that we don't give any of this discretionary money to already supplemented teams.
So, Mr. Estes, may I ask, with what you just stated, would that mean then no discretionary even to assistant coaches that aren't being supplemented?
Well,
These
you
are
know,
just representative of head coaches?
if you don't spell it out, the money goes to places it should not go. And we don't want to have 14 football coaches in middle school, you know.
Getting an additional 2% out of discretionary in addition to what they're already getting, is that?
Well, I don't mind if we had to pay, say if, I don't have the supplement schedule, but if we've got a track supplement, say, and a track coach has got 40 people, he sort of needs a little help. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But, you know, for something that's not, we need to use that money where we don't have a supplement. Because every school's different, and that's the reason we put it in. But we got to make sure we don't supplement stuff that's already supplemented. Now, if you want 6% in archery, or 4% or whatever it was, you know, I can go for that, but then they can't get any of the 10%.
So again, though, you're talking about the whole program, not...
Well, however we set it up, I'm going to assume something here that the archery is going to get what, 4 or 6% for middle school? Is that correct?
4% is what I...
Okay, that's fine, but we don't want to make, if they've got 20 kids, one coach ought to handle it, but if they've got 30 or 40, they may need a supplement for an assistant. That's a lot of kids to watch, you know.
And I think that's where the discretionary is available to the principal, but it can't be on top of this 4, but we could have an assistant coach at 2 from a discretionary that the principal comes up with. The problem that you've pointed out, though, is that at Laverne, we've got 3% of the, and this is Laverne Middle that we've got the data for right in front of us here, we've got 3% out of the discretionary going to an assistant basketball coach. Do we really have 35 people sitting on the bench with 5 on the court? You know, that's a question, that's a fair question. You know, has the discretionary portion of the supplement been used wisely?
Did Laverne have a archery? Okay, so he had to do something with his.
Well, or he could just save it. He doesn't have to do something with it.
Well,
we don't want to spend it.
You don't have to spend all the money.
What?
Think it for a rainy day?
I don't believe you said that. No, you're quite right, of course. But evidently there were needed areas there. That's Laverne Middle, right?
It is.
Okay.
Oakland Middle, do we have an archery team there? So none of the discretionary fund there was used for archery? Ah, okay.
Let me know when we get to the unpopular comment section.
Well, I think we've been there for some time. And Mr. Blair, you brought up, and so did Mr. Estes, really two interesting points. But I'm going to stick to yours with Eagleville. We've got a number of people out there that are supplemented for coaching basketball. They just don't happen to be the same person. I don't know if there's a difference there or not. I don't know. I'm just not that familiar with it anymore. And Eagleville, of course, is a special situation because it's K through 12. But if they have girls and boys, but archery has both. It's co-ed. So if boys basketball at Eagleville, I don't know for certain, but I suggest that we have a head boys basketball coach. We have an assistant boys basketball coach, both of who are supplemented. We've got an 8th grade basketball coach who I can almost promise you is supplemented. I don't know if there's an assistant boys basketball coach on the elementary or middle school, if you will, level. I don't know that, but that's at least 3, and it could be 4. Now, if somebody doubles up and does 2 different jobs, I think we're going to supplement that person.
Twice?
Yes. Why not? It's double practice. It's double everything.
We have several coaches who get, the most I'm aware of right now is 3 supplements.
Because of 3 separate sports?
3 separate sports, or doing
sport in different schools?
Yeah, there's some who do it between 2 schools.
Well, that's precedent.
That's what?
Precedent.
Yeah, yeah.
If it is done at a separate time, if you had all of the Eagleville kids, K through, well, however old you start archery, through 12 in the same practice, if they were essentially the same team, I would say no. But if they are practicing separately, yeah, then just the history and the way we've treated the supplements.
I want to break out here for just a second, speaking specifically to archery. I had some conversations with some of the archery coaches, and what has been impressive to me and why I want to find a solution to this somehow, somewhere, and this certainly is a reasonable starting place for that solution. This really has an academic characteristic. I think all athletics can be used in the classroom, but I've been particularly impressed with the way the national program sets up their curriculum, the way it integrates into the PE classes, and the lessons that are learned in focus and attention, and the way that teachers are using these archery programs in order to take students that maybe are having trouble centering themselves and using that. They're really using this effectively in that way. As such, I kind of ask the question, is this the first time where it's more important at the elementary level than it may be at the high school level? Because at the high school level, they've been doing this for a while. It's not like you can coach them a whole lot. It's really up to their eyeball watching it. And not to mention their commitment, their dedication, all of those things. But at the elementary level, boy, I mean, we're doing some heavy lifting, handing these students shooting instruments, and all of those kind of things. I am struck by this, though. elementary schools, and just to point this out for board consideration, elementary schools, we're talking about 4th and 5th grade. And therefore, middle schools, we're talking about 6th, 7th, and 8th, and high schools, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So we got 2 grades at the 2%, 3 grades at the 4%, 4 grades at the 6%. And I'm looking at that in consideration to justify why am I paying 2, 4, and 6 when the heaviest lifting may be happening with those 4th and 5th graders, teaching them how to hold a bow, don't shoot your neighbor, keep that arrow pointed down, all of those things. I'm impressed with the. I'm impressed, and more kids.
May actually have.
Yeah, I'm impressed with the elementary effort here.
Do we currently supplement elementary sports? No other sport gets a supplement elementary?
When we moved away from the K-8 schools, there are 2 exceptions, though. Thurman Francis has 6-8, and Eagleville has 6-8. But we ended K-5 supplements to the youth. And I don't know, there may have been some minor basketball participation. I'm not certain there was, but yeah. As we moved to middle schools, we moved away from the old supplements that we had at the K-8 schools.
But there are still some that are in existence.
Well, only because of Thurman Francis's grade
the only one?
structure, and Eagleville being a K-8.
But
there's 6th to 8th grade supplements at those 2 schools.
Yeah, K through 5, we don't have any athletics.
No. Or what we have is like junior pro, some items like that. We do not have any school board supplemented athletics.
Those are like community types organizations, which I think back
ours.
to the archery team's presentation and point, that isn't available in the community to start growing these archers up to where we need them to be to compete. And of course, as we can see now, they're even competing on that level in elementary school. But if we don't have that feeder program somewhere to train those archers to be middle school and high school competitive, then we may wind up losing the program to begin with, or we're certainly going to have interest from those elementary coaches start to wane, and rightfully so. We can go back to Mr. Holliday's very good points about how much more work they're possibly putting in at that level than they would be. So, I mean, I understand the point that we haven't ever supplemented elementary school teams, but I think this is a different day and a whole kind of different way to look at it with what we've got with the archery.
Mr. Blair, I think we've reached the, how did you describe it? Unpopular. If you have something to say that's unpopular, this is a good time.
The elephant that's in the room is still the budget. And we still have to contend with that. And I don't know anybody on the board, excuse me, that doesn't have a concern for the budget this year. So the things we may approve here may or may not survive that process. But I know we have to move forward. I am proud of the success that archery has had, and it's taken off, and there's no going back. But I do not ever remember, as a board member, approving archery as a program. If we did, I certainly don't recall it. The concern that this board and future boards are going to have is if these principals allow these programs to start without board approval, lacrosse, field hockey, rugby, rollerblade hockey, or any number of opportunities, I believe in the future these programs, these principals need to come to the board to make sure that the board approves it, and that we're not surprised like we are with the success of archery. So those are some unpopular comments, but the budget's going to continue to be an issue, and future activities are going to be an issue. So I certainly would like to see future boards have a say in programs that go into our facilities.
When Mr. Bush and Mr. Odom had a meeting with the principals, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, I made that point to them, and their meeting was on security and students' reactions to the tragedy in Florida. But I did take a few minutes to point that out to the principals, that them sitting in their offices and somebody says, well, you know, we really need to have such and such a team here. We've never had it. We need to have it. And that just could not happen anymore. They were going to have to come to us and ask us if we could at least prove what took place and or what they wanted to do. And I might point out that, well, two things, I guess. First of all, I don't want to, and I know you don't either, I don't want to harm this archery program. We're talking about upwards of 1,300 children that are involved around the county, and that number, as Mr. Holliday told me at the county meeting, it's not going to go away, and we don't want it to. So I think, and also, to my knowledge, no policy was violated when they started that up. They did it. I don't know. I would say Buchanan is probably where it started, but I don't really know that.
Christiana, I think.
Christiana,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And it absolutely exploded with popularity. And here we are. So I don't know how much longer you want to discuss this. We'll do whatever y'all wish to do. I can see there's going to be some more comments here in just a second. But we're really helping this more with promotions, what we're doing. and that's fine. That's good. And it can always be amended. And as Mr. Blair just said, a veteran just said, you never know whether it's going to be cut to pieces by the county commission, or whether it'll be approved or amended or whatever. Yes, ma'am.
With all due respect to my fellow board member here, I think whether or not the board approved this as a sport is really irrelevant, because it's not a current policy that we have to do so. Now, is it something that ought to be addressed moving forward based on the concerns that have been expressed? Absolutely, but that becomes a policy decision, not a decision of whether or not we should supplement a sport that's booming and that has brought the success and the kids to the program that this one has. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of sort of the old saying of closing the barn door after the horse is already out. I mean, it hasn't ever been, to my knowledge, a policy or practice that we had to. So.
You made my point, because that was the point I was trying to get to.
I'm so sorry. Okay. My apologies.
I was just pointing out.
I didn't let you finish, did I?
Well, actually, you did. I just want for future activity that these sports or activity comes to the board, since the board's eventually going to have to fund the supplements.
Right.
And this supplement list is getting longer and longer as we go, and at some point, this board or a future board may have to say, I'm sorry, we can't afford it. But no, I'm not saying that archery is successful and it's like you said, can't put that horse back in the barn.
My apology if I misunderstood.
But that's my point, is that this board's going to have to make a policy at some point in time.
So something perhaps be looked at the next policy meeting.
Perhaps.
Or not make a policy, because the presentation said that this has been in the works for 8 years. For 8 years, the community has grown this with no support from this board. And this board has not given any money, and this board is not compelled in this decision to grant this supplement. It's being requested, the case is being made for it, but would we really say as a board, just as a counterpoint, lest it be the only expression that we don't ever want this kind of success to ever happen again, let's make sure we put a policy in place so that something like this doesn't catch on. For 8 years, they did this on their own. And they would do it next year if we say, hey, we can't afford a supplement. Or if the county commission says, we're not going to allow you to do that supplement. I really am going to have to think about a policy that says a principal can't show some initiative and respond to an interest in their building.
I don't know that I agree with that 100% or not. And our policy, we wouldn't want the policy to be worded that way. We're just asking them to ask. That's all. I think Ms. Bush has already meant the policy.
Well, there was a little support.
Continuously.
There was a little support. I mean, the activity did go on inside our building. There was heat, there was air conditioning, there was light. I mean, there are some things that we did provide as a board. So, point taken, but I don't know that I agree 100%.
Ms. Seymour came before us, if I recall, and from Whitworth, Buchanan, made a very good presentation along with a coach or two, I believe. I don't recall exactly, but I do think I remember that we went along with whatever she wanted to do. If I remember right, maybe she's pretty good at correcting me. I think we did. I think we tried to help her anyway. Or do we have further?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On this budget right here, coaching supplements, new ones, archery supplements, new ones, we're looking at $255,000. Plus there's going to be a raise when we give a 2% raise to faculty.
I included that.
Well, thank you. That's included in this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it doesn't look as bad as it used to. But we don't know how much money we've got to spend yet, do we?
There's
And I can
We
see,
might ought to wait and find out if we got any money before we go committing anything.
Yeah.
I can see this growing into hockey and all other kind of sports too. Nashville's getting to be a big hockey town, so I mean it's just going to grow, and that's good. But we need to decide, I think, as a board, are we going to provide supplements for everything, or are we just going to provide it for a few things? I don't know where we draw the line. I think we've got to focus. How are we going to handle it as a board? If we're going to put something out there, we've got to be consistent and be persistent in doing it.
I like what we're doing right here, that something that did not have a supplement for 8 years and has shown itself to be a success earns a supplement. I think that that's a nice idea rather than, it coming to the board from the very beginning and needing every I dotted and every T crossed. Sometimes we just try something and we find that it's a success. And if that means that Siegel builds an ice rink, out back or something like that, who knows what may happen. I want us to have more opportunities, not more restrictions.
I don't think anybody's restricting anything. I think we're just trying to set some guidelines as far as how we're going to manage this. I think everything needs to have you got to have some consistency. We can't be inconsistent in how we manage our business here from a budget standpoint. We can't be giving one group one thing and not giving another group something. I just don't think it's fair, but that's my opinion.
Ms. Moore, anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay,
You want to finish up this?
we'll go back to page 3, and we're ready, I think, now for line 40, which is probably your largest item. If we do the 2% raise with the existing population and the additional teachers here, the cost would be about $4,327,000. You know, and we do not know from the state what we're going to get. My guess is it will not be enough to cover the 2% because we have more teachers than the state minimum. You know, so that's kind of your issue very often. And I'll have to say, if we have to cut the budget a lot, the only place that you get large dollars at one time, you can have the 10,000, the 20,000, and 30,000. You typically have enough experience to know you have to come back to this to get 500,000 or something like that very quickly. Because it's, for every percent, it's a little over $2 million. So just such as it is there. And you know, another interesting note, that's about 49.9% of your growth monies, of your increase. And if you remember, the fixed asset on the first page was 22.49, so you are now looking at 70% of our budget in the fixed cost plus the certified cost is roughly 70% of the whole increase that you're looking at when you begin to look at that. So, such as it is.
Okay. I'm going to just want to interrupt you just a second here and just make a general comment on the salaries of our teachers, specifically and staff members. And I think this board is very cognizant of the fact of what's going on in a number of states right now, including Kentucky, just to our north. And I just, we do not want that to happen. That would be a disaster. And I would just encourage the county commission to watch the news too. Because they are coming up on a very important decision here within the next couple of months about their budget, taxes, and things of that nature. And I don't know what will be our total that we send to them, but I'm going to support them to pass it. Because it's tough. I've been on that side of that. It's a tough decision, and it's tough here too.
Okay, are you ready to go to the technology and software? The professional development tracking software having to replace School Station, 55,000. Follett Library tracking is not new. We do that for the check-in, check-out, so 46, basically 47 and 48. All of those, and 48 is that Microsoft licensing for the Office that we do for everybody. You can see that's about a $241,000 expense, but that's not new. We just put it in here for you to see again what we're doing. The Blackboard is a student management system. That is a change for the curriculum devices that we added that back on 314. That's 63. Looking on page 4, again, annual fees not new, line 50. 51, 52, and 53, again, to try to align with our online courses. Those are not terribly expensive, $4,800 and $10,000 for some teacher stipends to try to increase that a little bit to get our teachers to teach online courses. Of course, I know the commission enjoys this because when we do an online course, we're not having to build a classroom. We're not having to do a lot of other things, and you may supplement the teacher a little bit to do that, but you're not having great other costs. There's retirement costs and other things that you have in a lot of other things. So line 54 is the presentation you heard today, $1,439,998 for these, starting with our middle schools at 2-to-1 ratio. And let me tell you one good side of this. If we could get this out of ending fund budget this year, then we could take $1.4 million out of the monies for the next year. And that would allow them to go ahead and order the machines so they'd be in place in August. So I'm getting my fingers crossed when Mr. Sandy gets through calculate what we spent this year, what might be left over. Maybe we can spend that this year out of this year's budget because we're going to get some growth funds, it looks like. Maybe, you know, because enrollment growth funds, that we could go ahead and do that, and this would be a nice item to take out of next year's expectation.
So would you be suggesting then that the $1,439,000 that is currently in the 18-19 budget would shift to 17, 18?
If we could get enough ending fund balance to do that, have I put you on the spot, Mr. Sandvik?
The other
Sweating now.
the other thing, and I hesitated saying this while Ms. Benson was making her presentation, as we move to this program, and I totally am behind moving toward it, but as we move to it, purchases like this are going to become a every year expenditure, because we are going to have to initially build them up in the grades, and then we are going to have an ongoing replenishment program. So yes, I am hoping that we can order the middle school
But if
programs out of this year money.
next June you want to order for the high school,
Right.
then you're going to need this money
we're gonna
and a
need
little
the money,
more.
Yeah.
And that was what I was going to say. You know, if that happens, that's great. But we still have the plan for high schools the following year, and this would allow us to do it in the summertime instead of at the beginning of the year. And it would allow us to begin the school year like we need to, and also do some of the summer training where we're not pulling teachers out of the classrooms during the year and paying for subs in addition to this cost.
It's kind of like our textbooks, really.
Yeah, very similar textbook.
You're paying a year ahead each time.
That's the point we want to get to with this, really.
My feedback on line 54 is, regardless of what ending fund balance looks like, please keep that fully funded and press for that.
We may not, I can't go with that statement, Mr. Holliday. We are not seeing the rapid growth in local revenues we've seen the last couple of years.
We'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at our next meeting, but we have to be very mindful of our fund balance.
The line,
we'll be able to do this.
Line 55 and 56, Mr. Zago alluded to that if we do not have to go and just do the replacement and replace a whole lab, but we're given 2 to 1 with the computers, then you're not having to spend this $600,000 and that sort of thing in there to be able to do that. So there's savings at the time that you're doing that when you're changing the model of delivery that you're doing, because you really have your lab in the classroom now too.
So, and that goes for the 56, the budgeted software as well?
The budgeted software, that is for items we are already doing, that we just wanted to mention in these sheets. So
It's going to come off.
Back on page 3, where I said annual fee not new, he's had to build in the growth and enrollment. So in the number that you see out there for the cost, it would be the new enrollment numbers, but then he turned around and what did we spend in 17, 18 that will not be new money. So when you see your total there, 993,000 technology subtotal, that's after we subtract out what we've already spent in 17, 18. Since we included items, again, we're not double counting it. That's what I'm trying to say.
We're trying to just show the increases.
Yeah, ultimately, that's what we're trying to get for you.
In this document.
But I wanted to give y'all enough information to see what we're already doing, because I think you need that information, and what are we adding increases to? And the way we can do that is then subtract it out. If you understand what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we move to classified, I need to remind this board of a discussion that we had in the past about supplements regarding pool managers. You have 4 high schools that those on-site coaches are having to manage. I forget how many teams we have now swimming. Is it 17 or so? So
Mr. Tackett can probably tell us.
I mean,
You got 16, 17 teams, I'd say.
and that's not for discussion at this moment, but we need to remember that we had talked about that at some point in time to
We can build it as a line item in there to look at.
Okay, because we had
with the others.
We had conversations about.
How much did we say? I'm not sure. They're getting a swim. They'll get a swim coach supplement, but it's just a cleanup and all at the schools that have pools, which is Laverne, Smyrna, Oakland, Riverdale. That's it.
Yeah.
If they're having to do the preparation for the meets from all the elementary and the middle that are there, do they need a little more for having to do that?
It's something to consider anyway, so.
That's a good spot for discretionary fund.
But they don't have it at the high school right now.
It's in the proposal.
Yeah.
Just wanted to remind the board that we had that conversation at one time.
It's complicated, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it does.
Okay. So technology about 3.9% of your increase. Going next to classified personnel, again, adding we open the annex at Oakland Middle School next year, putting that secretary there. Depending on, I don't know exactly what it'd be the full year. It may be closer to December before that person takes place. You may want to start them a little early. But that position, SPED educational assistance, I reduced that by 4, again from 18 to 4. So that one's a little bit less number. SPED occupational and therapy assistant, that's a new position. ESL educational assistants, again, that's 3. We haven't, as we get those additional 13 teachers and you start some new classrooms, very often you have to have some assistance work among those in the high needs schools. ESL district translator, this is a part-time position. We only call in a translator when we need it. You have to realize that we're required by law at a parent-teacher conference. If somebody comes in that doesn't speak English and they request a translator, then we have to provide that translator. We work through MTSU to try to find in many languages. While we have the 100 languages or so, we do have to provide translators sometimes. So that's what that is.
Have we ever, because the number of languages spoken, that report that came out, I mean, have we ever encountered a situation where we weren't able to find one?
I asked Ms. Hall that question. It's been some time since I asked. She said there's so many dialects and stuff that typically going through MTSU and that's where she goes to her pool. Basically, they're able to provide somebody that can kind of communicate. I'll tell you another thing that she does too, which is really good. In some of these EAs, she tends to hire EAs that speak a foreign language for those ESL classes. So very often we can have the EA come back to the parent-teacher conference and do it, and they actually know the kids very often too a little better, which is even a better translation when you're talking what questions about your program and that sort of stuff. So she's been very good at working out those little idiosyncrasies that go with that. North Rutherford PD Clerk Center, that's a half a position. That's your teacher center, what we call it. Computer technology person, that was one for, I think, Mr. Solomon. Computer repair, one there, 59,571. That's a new position. Clerical staff at Rockville High, partial year positions, 3 of those. Rocky Fork Elementary, now that's been approved. We have to start thinking about the secretary for that. You saw the principal back over on the other page, you remember. Custodians, 3 that we'll have to decide where we assign those, basically based upon numbers, and we see what those are. Custodians for Rockville High, you'll start some of those early because you got some of that cleanup. Some of them will be working next summer, depending on when they turn it over to us. We also, one of your things early on that your principal will do is hire his lead custodian, because then the lead custodian helps him hire the other custodians, plus also helps with, as packaging and deliveries are made with the boxes and all, that'll start at the same time the contractor's completing, you're getting deliveries. So those custodians help with that also. And that's, again, Rockville High, Rocky Fork Elementary. Maintenance staff, 2 new positions for maintenance, and I think it was going to be plumbing and electrical. I think Mr. Carter told us last time. Line 74 is kind of a new one. This is the athletic trainers, and this is one we don't know exactly where it stands just yet. Again, how much are we going to have? This 4 full-time, 3 part-time, 3 supplemented CTE teachers. Again, roughly that could be up to $414,000. So you kind of some notes out there about what they might be, or can we get the grad assistant? This is an unknown to us really right now. Where we stand till we see how much help we're going to get from some of our community resources there in that one. Still kind of an unknown that we're trying to determine. And I don't know that you've been able to get all of that yet, have you, Mr. Tackett? You were working on it, I know.
All we know is we've got a commitment from POA and NHB to what they currently done. We do know NHB is not funding past this next year.
So we may be able to adjust that one a little bit, Mr. Sandy, if we know we've got the same level of support. Nurses, OTs, CODAs, years of experience, these are degreed required positions. We stop them at 15. If we take them to 21, that's $146,280. And all of our nurses, except one, are RNs, by the way. One LPN does some fill-in and is only hired on an hourly basis. Is not a full-time employee person. Then 76 is not new, and the classified percentage increase, again, if we do the 2% there, 401,000. Classified personnel, that's a little over 2,638,000, 10.3%, so we're something over 80% now.
Mr. Odom, I'd like to add a position for this board to consider. With the career and technical program being as robust and basically probably one of the things that were well known in the county, I would like to add an administrative assistant to that program.
That is in the budget.
Somebody's going to have to Tyra Pilgrim back there, fan her.
Oh.
Full-time?
I thought I had it on this sheet and I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
It's in the budget.
Okay. Well, I waited to the end of it because I didn't see it.
Well, we'll make sure, so we can break it out as a line item.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
You're talking to full-time?
Yeah.
Okay.
A number of years ago, there were 3 people in CTE. Of course, what happened is we then put the secretary, instead of one up here, we put them secretary in each of the major high schools to do it. But again, the workload here with the number of classes and all has changed again. So it's in there in another place. We'll just.
Excellent.
But it'll be on this sheet the next time.
Okay. I didn't mean to be redundant. I
No,
just
we'll
didn't
bring
see
it to the front. I'm glad you pointed that out because we need to do that. Okay, is that line, page 5, any other things? Page 6 is basically textbooks. It is what we're spending in 17-18, a little over $6 million, but some of the social studies adoption is huge. Remember, we don't order those till June. The books haven't been adopted. The state hadn't placed a list out at this time, but the thing about social studies, it really goes through all 12 grades, kind of basically. So there's going to be, that's a very large adoption when it occurs. Then world languages will be for, you're really looking what here it will be started in 1920, because you're spending them in the summer of 18.
Or fall of 18.
Well, no, you're spending that, that's in your budget now for fall of 18.
Right, yes.
Because we're in 2018.
Yes.
I had to stop and think a minute. 2018, since we purchased in June, so they'll be in place. Starting in August, the ones that we're purchasing this year were in last year's budget. The one will be in the 20 year will be that additional amount there, another $2 million. I did reduce on anything on program textbooks, something on there.
What about 87 then?
Less 2007. We spend this year already $6,559,000. Remember, we only want to show you new cost, so we got to subtract out what we're spending this year.
Okay.
So the increase to the budget for 18-19 would have to be $2,700,000 more.
Okay.
If we do what we have listed above. Again, we wanted to show you all we would be adopting, but then, because it changes every 6 years, 6-year adoption cycle. Then new bus routes, I went from 9 to 7. Basically, roughly, if we take 1,200 growth, about 50% of our students ride the buses, 600 riders. Looking at 7, CTE, not CTE, but CDC, those special buses do not carry as many students. But here's the other problem we're running into in Rutherford County it's hard to base it on just the number of, say, 125, 130 new students ride of buses, because the traffic is getting so heavy, we're having to add additional buses to get the kids at school on time. Honestly, we've now,
I believe
just
it.
the transportation is not just carrying the kids, it's the travel time is growing, and that's changing our dynamic in there.
Does that change or affect our passenger recommendations? I mean, do we not want maximum capacity buses now because...
Well, we're doing that already.
Okay.
But can a bus run 2 routes anymore? Or, you know, not necessarily.
Right. Okay.
That's the issue. An hour and a half is all you can keep a kid on a bus.
Yep.
We have to match that for sure. Then when you add new schools, it also tends to change some too, that you have to change that because you're making additional stops. So that's, again, a little $2 million. Then new bus route 7, rate change if we do the bus drivers of 2% also, that's kind of your $315,000. So that's about $721,000. I think that was page 6. Page 7, other, which is just other things. Basically, there's some of this we already do. The real new item there is the line 99, Smyrna High, the Cambridge license for them, which is very similar to the IB program that Oakland has. Cambridge International is another one of those, which is kind of a good hook for students, and it's a high-achieving rigor program for them. We've increased a little bit of the training because that's gotten, look how much we spend on training now for AP and Cambridge and IB, about roughly $100,000. Some school districts do not send their teachers to AP training at all. I kind of think that's a mistake. So Rutherford County has, and that's the reason we get good results sometimes. We pay for training our teachers on the front end, and they typically have to go. Western Kentucky does quite a bit. It's at different places. We have to look where AP is conducting the training or Cambridge is conducting the training. We send teachers there. Sometimes it involves hotel motel to get them there to do that if it's somewhere else.
We're going to continue the Avid, but then add in the Cambridge?
Right now they want to continue that, but I think that Avid, they're really two different focuses. Avid is a more of a support type program. If you notice your socioeconomic and your changes there, and Avid tends to support much of that. That's why it was put in place. The Cambridge will support your higher end. Now, what Laverne has done, and we provided some support to them in the past, is they're doing more of the dual enrollment type thing.
Okay.
Also, Cambridge and IB and all will count towards the graduate ready, which, you know, in the future report cards, actually this year, everything this year is ACT, but beyond that, you're going to have to show improvements in your graduate ready, and that they either have to have the 21 on their ACT or they have to do those early post-secondary opportunities. And IB and Cambridge both help provide that opportunity.
Okay.
And you're going to have Rockville out there in the future too. That's going to be another AP and some other training there. And we already spend $146,000, so subtracting that out. Rockville High startup costs, uniforms. You give them some monies to buy office stationery, things like that, letterheads, all of that sort of thing and all. So about that, buying those uniforms initially, and very often schools have to take care of that after they get going. They wind up buying their own uniforms out of the athletics and that sort of thing. So, but we start them up, you know. So that's an expensive startup. Rocky Fork Elementary, they won't have uniforms, but you got other startup costs and all there, roughly $35,000. A new item 105, you know, we're not getting any more lease cars from Nissan. And so we've got to start buying cars or used cars or something like that, and I think this is I hope this is a high enough estimate. But 4 cars, Nissan talked about maybe taking some of their lease cars and offering those to us that had low mileage or something, lower mileage. We can't count on that now for sure. So this is kind of a new cost to you from here going forward for driver's ed. And I don't know a lot of options in that we've got there. Good subtraction on debt service, basically not as we're paying off the EESI loans. If we're not going to get into another one, then that becomes a cost that we can deduct. So that was significant enough that Mr. Sandvik wanted y'all to see that. So right now, $25,623,862. And the other page 8 is kind of info for you. Again, the BEP, this TASER index, which is the ability to pay, we've talked about before, an initial estimate, we do not know till we get these figures. And Mr. Sandvik may not have his meeting with the state till the 16th and 17th of April. That's what the date they've stated right now. Our next budget meeting is the 18th, so he's going to have to do a lot of work. Get ready for us the 18th, because we have to have a budget to the county commission on the 23rd of April. So we've got a lot to do, but we have a potential to lose another $1,250,000 added to those on the first page that I showed you. That's costs that we can't really control, changing in insurance costs, changing in retirement costs, and now changing in the ability to pay. You know, you're looking. A good bit of our increase is actually stuff we can't even control. There's a significant portion of it. The property tax reappraisal, we don't know what they'll do. It came in a little over 30% increase in property values, but again, it depends on what the commission, do they adopt the certified rate, which means you do not get any more monies per penny. You may have some new buildings that'll get included or new construction that's added to it, but you would not see an increase if they adopt the certified rate. So that's an unknown. Local sales tax, and we don't know where that is, but we budgeted 4.5% increase in sales tax. The county, Ms. Nolan budgeted for the county 4.5% in sales tax. February came in again at what, about 3.7%?
Yes.
3.6 to 3.7. And I said something to you the last meeting, that's coming in less than the 4.5% right now. We hope that as cars start selling now, if the weather warms, and again, the tax break from the federal government, that people see that money and they go out and spend it, you may recover that.
How is she on the year, do we know? She's always low. How is she on the year?
It's close, the year to up to date. Wasn't it close to 4? What was it, do you remember? I was there when she was kind of making a report, some of them.
I don't remember what she...
It wasn't 4.5.
The county only is probably doing a little bit better than we are, because that piece that the county gets is so limited.
Right.
Yeah. But we had been holding right at about 4.5 until the March receipts for February.
The Title II, I'd put this in there from your last meeting, so I put it in there again. We learned this morning, basically, that while the administration had said reduce Title II by 20%, Congress did not. So they continued it on. So rather than losing well over $100,000 right now, and these are preliminary numbers, we may have lost $17,000. So that will not be near as much negative. The Title II, remember, a lot of that's our teacher training funds. So that's a very good piece of information to this point. Mr. Chairman?
Board? Comments?
And we will try to have you that line item thing, I think, either tomorrow night or Wednesday night. We'll give it to you so before we meet again. Of course, it will not have on it the changes that we might add you from that, but you'll get a real close idea.
As we're selling the value of the 2-to-1 technology initiative, Mr. Zago mentioned that if we can repurpose a lab classroom in a building,
we'll bring that up.
Then we've saved a lot. And Mr. Clardy can tell us, even at our very low per square foot value, we ought to put a value on repurposing a classroom that we recover by making this technology investment. That would be huge.
And of course, the reason we had to go to mini labs, you remember, we had to create all these labs because of the online testing.
Online testing, absolutely.
And you had to have a place to do the online testing. We couldn't do the online test in the classroom. And so we had to be able to test one half the students at each time frame. That was a state's requirement. So we had to take away classrooms and create additional labs to do the testing so we could test half the people being tested at one time. So again, if we can do the one-to-ones, we get there, or even 2-to-1. You know, 2-to-1, that could swap out classrooms, and for 30 students could have enough computers, you know, to test. So you could do that. You're wanting to say something.
Board, clearly we have some challenges. We already knew that. I don't know if you, perhaps at some point in the next day or two, we need to discuss maybe some changes in our schedule, but I think we can wait on that. I don't think we have to go make any decision on that at this time. Tomorrow night it's 5 o'clock. Next night is also 5 o'clock. Work session tomorrow. Are there any further comments or anything tonight? It's been a good meeting. Lots of give and take. I appreciate all of it. I feel adjournment sneaking up on us. We're adjourned. Thank you.